Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me. I hope you. Well, I don't know if I hope I can. You can see me, but let's see if that stream is actually starting. Not yet. Not yet. Not yet. Which tells us a lot about like the lag between everything here. Here we go. And I can hear myself, so that is good. How's everybody doing? On this wonderful Tuesday morning, the 18th of February, which, February being the kind of shorter month means we're already like more than halfway done with this month, which I think is a good thing, all things considered. Hey, how are you doing, my friend? Still awake? Drinking coffee so you can sleep better, or what's the plan for today after this weekend full of excitement? Hey, Britton, how are you? How's the reading going, and the writing, and the playing of games, and all the other things? I am doing all right. I am further along with Blood and Mistletoe than I was before I got confused last week, so that is a good thing. Well, the House of Chains is, how can I say this? It does come with some pretty direct benefits for its employees. I would counsel against trying to rise too high in its hierarchy because I think there's a lot of, hiring and firing going on in the upper echelons of the House of Chains. So be careful there, my friend. Yeah, so I'm further along with Blood and Mistletoe, which is, one of the things of reading these kinds of like history books. One of the things I really appreciate, about, especially Ronald Hutton has a knack for that, which is finding obscure sort of like people that wrote about a topic back in, I don't know, 1750 or 1820, and finding their like more obscure sort of like ideas they had, and he doesn't disappoint. So you learn a lot about what, obscure people in Wales in the 18th and 19th century thought druids were or were not. And it's at least highly entertaining. Yeah, conversations can do that. I get that, Britain. Case in point, one writer who wrote about both druids and about like world religions in general from like the late 1800s, mid 1800s, by the name of Higgins, had the interesting ideas that, on the one hand, men were clearly superior to women in everything, and like including like metaphysical dimensions and all of that. But at the same time, he also thought that black men were far superior to white men in intelligence and everything else, which is at least surprising for a white British dude. Which interesting. Also, Buddhists good, Hindu bad, Anglicans good, Catholics bad, and it's a mess, but certainly a entertaining mess. So I'm very happy to see where this is going. Also, just past the chapter called "An Interlude Between Two Williams," which is about William Blake and William Wordsworth and their attitudes towards druids, and of course, everyone else around, like the turning of the 19th century, 18th to 19th century, and their attitudes towards druids. Good luck with the Underground Railroad. It's one I have always wanted to read. I wanted to read Colson Whitehead for a long time and just never got around to it. Maybe this year. Who knows? It might just be the right time. The yeah. See, I'm very glad I did hold off on making a video and said I want to make a video on like more on like a meta level on like how BookTube interacted with the whole thing, because A, there's a lot of material, and B, it's it saved me from doing saying anything that I then had to backpedal or anything of the sorts, and that I think is I'm kind of lucky there. But that's all I say about it. After all, I mean, I just woke up. I haven't checked what happened in the last, say, 12 hours yet. And I assume it's the kind of thing where stuff happens constantly. So, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I expect it to be good. I've heard really good things about both Underground Railroad and Nickel Boys. I personally think I want to start possibly with Harlem Shuffle because it seems to be more not necessarily more fun, but and I'm sure it will also deal with questions of racism and all of that stuff. But like, um, I like the idea of like a 1920s ish or whatever, whenever it is set, more like crime kind of thing. It currently resonates more with me than Underground Railroad or Nickel Boys, I guess. Not sure if that's a good choice or not. We'll see. So yeah, looking forward to hearing more about your experience with Underground Railroad. I have not read any Hardy yet. I suspect I would enjoy his stuff though. It's more like a question of like how much you read and what you get to read and so forth. Well, Britain, Guards is certainly the kind of book that does have a lot of stuff you can talk about. Um, Here's a tip. I don't know how you are as a reader in that kind of stuff, but there is a very interesting annotated Pratchett archive. It's called lspace.org, I think, at the moment. And the whole lspace thing makes sense once you read Guards. It's a Pratchett in joke in a way, but it is basically a sort of like fan run. It's not a wiki as such because it has like one or two editors who get to do all of that stuff. But what it does is it has like an annotations page for every single for every Pratchett novel, where it does sort of like annotate all the jokes and all the references and all the stuff that is going on that you may not pick up on because there's so many references in there. So I think as a resource, if you are interested in that kind of stuff and want to understand all the terrible jokes that Pratchett packs into one specific book and are not always certain because the book is like 30 ish 40 years old now and also written by someone much more embedded in like 1980s and 70s British culture than American culture, for example, then that I think might be a very helpful resource. But it's absolutely not necessary to have that. It's just like a bonus when you go like, oh wait, I did not know that because why would I? Yeah, I have not read any Faulkner. I'm really not good with like American. They don't figure in like high school education in Germany. I don't know if you read any of that kind of stuff in high school in the US, but the English stuff you read um, in high school in Germany is usually more UK focused in a lot of ways. So you get to read some Shakespeare, of course, and obviously some poets if you're lucky or unlucky, and all of that. And a lot of English class in Germany do read 1984 or Animal Farm. I read Animal Farm in high school. I read 1984 like on my own. Um, I got to read A Brave New World because I got lucky, and my English teacher at the time was um, uh, a fan of science fiction literature themselves, so that helped a lot there. But we didn't read any Faulkner. We didn't like that in any way or form. I think we did read a short story, something Hemingway, but not Old Man and the Sea, but just like something shorter. And we did read a Roald Dahl short story at some point. That's what I remember. I think it kind of depends. Like, I mean, I did read an excerpt from The Graduate for like my final English exams. I know that because I had to write about that specific extract from the text. So, mm, like, I think the problem with a lot of like that specific type of American literature, I guess, is that it is so heavily commenting on American history and life in at that moment. And since it's like 20th century history, American history is not something that you learn a lot of in history class in Germany as well, because we got to get through all that Nazi shit, right? Um, so talking about it in history in English class would mean that the English teacher would have to do like a lot of add in like a lot of context that people don't have. Whereas if you read something like your Faulkners or whatever in the US, it's kind of expected that you have at least like a vague understanding what they're talking about. And I think that's where, say, someone like Orwell works better, because you read Orwell, Animal Farm. You can give a very quick rundown of what Animal Farm is talking about without going into too much detail of Soviet history, because everyone kind of knows the revolution, then Lenin, then Stalin, and then everything bad. That's that's pretty easy to do, and I think that's just like one of those challenges that you have when you teach a different when you do basically teach in a different language, because you have to sort of do all that other context beyond just learning the words and appreciating the way you can build stuff with language. You also have to teach the culture and the history, and the further away from general knowledge you get, the harder that stuff becomes, I think. um, I think that's partly of how that works, or why that works, I think. But I would have to go back and see what else I had to read in English class. I just often don't remember. I remember like because I went to like a Waldorf school, like the anthroposophic kind of school, and there you start English at like the first grade already, and you start reading relatively early. So you read a lot of like fairy tales and stuff in different languages, and we got like a well, obviously YA-fied, children-fied, whatever, retelling of the story of King Alfdan and his queen. What's her Ragnald? So like a cool Viking story in English, which is certainly helps if you want to engage like 10 or 12-year-olds to to start reading English, I guess. Um, I have not gone back to that. I suspect if I would, I would find a lot of troubling and problematic things in that book. And I did, I mean, we did read some Charles Dickens, of course. I mean, you kind of go through Charles Dickens as well. But so yeah, more British authors than American authors in German high school. At least when I went to high school. I obviously things have changed since then, so I assume people are reading different books now. See, the thing is, I'm aware of Faulkner, and it's a matter of time before I read Faulkner. Also, why is Faulkner the one that that has all the heavy metal titles? I don't know. I got to read Faulkner at some point. It's more like a question of time and all of that, right? All right, guys. So let's do the first sprint. But if you feel like talking more about jazz, you can totally do that in chat while I go through some messages and stuff. I also need to talk to my sister because, of the whole like family stuff. But as good news, my mother is supposedly to get out of the hospital tomorrow. So that's good news. So yeah, see you back at the hour. And until then, have fun with whatever you're doing, whether it's being productive by reading, writing, or talking about jazz. And I am back. How did you all do? Well, I guess you went to bed. So good night if you're still there. Otherwise, I hope you get to actually get some sleep. So yeah, I did do the things that I set out to do, which is mostly, catch up on comments, emails, messages, all of that stuff. And yeah, what can you do? I did not look deeper into news on the Daniel Green situation. I've seen that Murphy Napier has uploaded a 4-minute video. I have not clicked on it yet. Might be interesting to see that specific one. And yeah, who knows? Beyond that, yeah. I'm definitely going to finish the Blood and Mistletoe book today, which is a good thing because then I can get to well, I guess I should probably first go and read, or reread in this case, Shadow Captain by Alistair Reynolds, because then I can make the video for Shadow Captain. What with, getting the next tooth set in, like the replacement tooth set in next Tuesday, I guess I'm having the Revenger, having the Shadow Captain and Bone Silence videos recorded by then would be obviously the best thing that could happen. So I better speed up the process of rereading those. Because it's been like 5-6 years since I read them, probably longer. I think the third one came out in 2019. So the second one probably 18, 17, something like that. So been a while. And yeah, I don't exactly remember what happened in the second one. Yeah, messages and so forth. I mean, what can you do? The world is still going to hell, apparently, at least according to the kind of newsletters that I'm subscribed to. Maybe that's a me problem. So yeah, probably gonna do Shadow Captain next, and then go to Summer of Fire and Blood, and hopefully that will give me enough motivation to go back to writing the thing that I actually wanted to write, started to write last year in November. But who knows? Stuff remains vague as always, I guess. Beyond that, it'll be interesting to see what happens next on like the booktube sphere, like what people are, if people are just going back to normal and I don't know, bashing romantasy or whatever it is that people do on booktube these days, or if there has been sort of like if the last week has sort of like leads to a bit of like a switch in topics. That would be nice. Would allow us to maybe look at something new for a change. But then, yeah, well. Oh, so you're still around. I thought you went to sleep. Seems that didn't work. So yeah. But when I look at like the titles of videos that YouTube is recommending to me right now, it's Daniel Green and how BookTok is ruining everything, and I don't know. Seems that people have stopped talking about books even more than usual. I did. That's a good question. When did I first read Malazan? Um, Post 2012. I know that. Although maybe before that. I think I can probably figure it out relatively easily. Because so the thing was, I had already read The Black Company, and a friend had started reading Malazan, and he's like, "Well, I've heard that it's like Black Company, and if you like Black Company, you should start Malazan." And then I had to wait for the audiobooks to come out. So I guess I can just check when. when Gardens of the Moon was published in audio, because I pretty much started right back then when that happened. So yeah, that was in October 2012, according to Audible. So yeah, that's the answer then, 2012. And then obviously it took a while because they published like one or two audiobooks uh, per year, and so forth. And then I reread it once, and then I reread it a second time. So my next reading will be the fourth Malazan reading. Yeah, that's a change of pace after 6 books of Wheel of Time. Especially like the sixth one is, I think the sixth one is the one that like a lot of people really enjoy and think is really good, and I thought it was not very good. I think that's the Lord of Chaos one, but I'm not quite sure with the like Wheel of Time because all the titles sound so different, so similar. Um, and you're now like this is your second reading, right? And you're at somewhere in Memories of Ice, of course. I think that's like one of the things that like one of the strengths of Malazan, right? Is that if you connect with it, it's a very very immersive, addictive kind of thing because there is so much to discover that is, and there's so much like freedom to explore stuff and go into all kinds of directions beyond just following the plot, right? There's so many other things going on that it's if the writing style works for you and if the slightly different world building from your traditional fantasy works for you, then it's very very easy to fall really really heavily into it in a way that a lot of other fantasy doesn't necessarily offer. Where you go like, well, yeah, I really enjoyed this, but now I'm done, and I'm gonna reread it in like a couple of years. Malazan is kind of hard to shake out of once once you're in, or if you're in. I think, like, I mean, I obviously have opinions on Wheel of Time. They're not necessarily very positive. I do, however, see why it was very successful at the time when it was published because it does, combine a lot of things. It is fairly accessible. It's easy to read, right? Robert Jordan does not exactly tax your vocabulary or anything else. He also makes sure that he says everything so many times that you can't even closely forget what happened before. So it's the same way that the stuff that Brandon Sanderson does, which is why Sanderson was such a good fit to finish Wheel of Time, right? Is because they have a similar approach to writing, a very very tell, don't show, and very heavy-handed approach to just about everything when it comes to themes or the likes, and all of that works. And Wheel of Time was sort of like the first, or like not not necessarily the first, but like it came at the right time, right? It did a lot of things. It was still like very traditional fantasy in a lot of ways, but it also had enough, it also was so massively longer than anything before that. Like, yes, you have like your Tad Williams Memory, Sorrow, Thorn. That's like 4 books, but it's done after 4 books, and it took him like 20, 30 years before he returned to that world, right? So it was like this ongoing series that was like much bigger than say your say Dark Elf, like your D&D novels, where you also have like long ongoing series of like 20 books or something, but they're much shorter books. And Wheel of Time has that sort of like scale thing going on. And I think what also really helped with Wheel of Time in particular is that it, at the same time, other books did not have, as much publicity. So someone on the publisher side did a lot of marketing well, but it also was the one series that was around and had a fandom when the internet became a thing slowly. So it was probably one of the first sort of like large scale epic fantasy fandoms that actually happened online, and that gave it like an additional boost because like people that were loving Wheel of Time were probably also, a lot of them were early adopters of, message boards and shit like that, and you suddenly have all of these people from all over the world talking about the same book together. And I think that that experience of having a global fandom, a much more accessible global fandom than the one of actually subscribing to physical fanzines or anything of the sorts, and having to travel like across the globe to conventions to talk to other people. Having that communication, that global communication, I think gave Wheel of Time a boost in popularity and influence then afterwards, of course, that is very much unique to the moment in time it was there. And I think that makes like a huge difference there. I don't read that much in German at the moment. It's certainly something I should probably do more of. Like, but the thing is, German literature is a weird. It's obviously smaller as a smaller group because smaller countries, smaller markets, all of that. And German fantasy and science fiction in particular is not a large field, and there's a lot of sort of like imitation and repetition going on. So like what I've seen, a lot of it is just not interesting to me because it's trying very hard to sort of emulate the success of like American or Anglo English language science fiction and fantasy, and it's sort of like in that regard, it's sort of like 10 years behind anything that's going on in the broader like genre fiction sphere. There is, of course, German literary fiction, realist fiction, contemporary fiction, dealing with the experience of growing up in, say, late 80s, early 90s Eastern Germany when the Nazis took over, that kind of stuff. And there's probably, there's value in that, but it's not something I'm necessarily interested in reading a lot. But that's sort of like where German literature is doing interesting things, I would argue. There's obviously a couple of classics in German genre fiction. I always talk about Stein und Flöte, Stone and Flute, which is absolutely brilliant. But yeah, that's a bit of a one-off. And then there's, the Carpet People and a couple more, but it's not that much, really. See, the problem is nothing much happens at the end. That's kind of the problem with Wheel of Time. If you're already up to number 6, it's gonna be gonna have like some form of happy end, and Rand gets all the girls, and yeah, who knows? It's not it's not that exciting, I think. Stone and Flute, yes. The thing is that what makes Stone and Flute such a good book, I think, is that it does touch on like a very continental Europe understanding of fable and fairy tale and myth that is different from the way that medieval Europe is often represented or twisted into American traditional fantasy or even British traditional fantasy, right? Is very French or English, which is a very different world from what you have like in the Holy Roman Empire and the what comes east of that, right? It's a very different approach, and Stone and Flute has it has elements that feel more continental, and thus it does not deny say like the Slavic influences that you have in German folklore, for example. It puts those things in. Also, it has very cool talking donkeys, so there's that. And things like that. So in that regard, I think it's a really interesting book, and don't let the whole like fairy tale thing fool you. It's very much adult. It's also pretty massive. I think I don't know if there's like an ebook version. There is an English translation apparently, and you can maybe get it in as a secondhand used book somewhere if you're lucky. I don't know if they even bother to release it on as an ebook as well in English, which is obviously the other part. Is like it's kind of difficult to get like English translations of German texts in that regard. I think the most important part is that it's very difficult to speak of like a German culture because Germany is has always been this like weird amalgamation of all kinds of different cultures, regions, and so forth. Like the differences in region are massive. Obviously, that's the case everywhere, but because of the fact that were actually individual kingdoms, dukedoms, all of that stuff, all the way up to say to the 19th to the beginning of the 19th century, basically, it means that a lot of that individual characteristics have stuck in a lot of ways, and then you have all these like overlaps, right? You have parts like of say Czech Republic, like Bohemia and Silesia, in a lot of ways, where this mix of German and German cultures and cultural influences and German language on the one hand, and different Slavic influences on the other hand, and that's yeah. I mean, obviously, you can always find parallels of that in say in every country, but I feel Germany does, by virtue of not developing a unified German culture or identity all the way up to say the beginning of the 19th century, a lot of this stuff is still lingering here, and I think that makes can make German cultures an interesting place. Oh, wait, it's messy. I mean, German history, that is, and not just the recent one. It's always been messy. All right, shall we do the second sprint? And I'll be back quickly before the end of the hour, so then I can go back to the gym for the first time because I think my cold has receded enough that I can torture myself in no new and interesting ways. Yeah, German. I mean, obviously with Gauss and all of those people, Germany did contribute stuff to mathematics at the time. That's true. Yeah, Gauss, Riemann, like 19th century German mathematics and logics definitely a big deal. I can understand that. All right, let's do the sprinting thing, and I'll talk to you shortly before the hour. And I'm back. Because, I want to catch the bus and see if I can go back to the gym without collapsing after last week's cold. How did you all do? I did work some more on getting my situation in Athens sorted out because, that's in like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Holy shit. Um, Getting close. So, yeah. Important stuff. And yeah, I'm going to go to the gym now for we'll see how. Usually I run for do 2 hours of cardio. I think I might cut it shorter today if I see that, I'm still coughing too much or anything of the sorts, but I feel restless. So maybe doing something physical will help. And obviously, feeling restless, physically restless, I think is a good sign that, say, health is returning. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna do, and I don't think I'll record a video today. I don't know. Maybe something will come up that feels right, but otherwise, I'll be back sprinting tomorrow morning, and maybe by then I'll have a better idea about a next video. Who knows? There's certainly enough stuff to be talked about. I just need to feel confident in doing it, which is, the main thing. It's all confidence. Who knows? So yeah, hope you had a good day, and yeah, thanks for hanging out. I do very much appreciate that. I know it's a weird time for most people, so yeah, mostly I'm doing this for myself, so I don't stay in bed until noon or whatever. Right? That's part of the plan here. But yeah, thanks. Try to get some sleep if you're in the US. Try to do something fun today if you're in Europe, and or in other time zones where you're awake now, and see you tomorrow with whatever else I can come up with.